Any day, anytime. Feel free to stop by and you can see what they're doing. So you're welcome.
I will be doing
Mr.
it.
Billups, do you have a question?
Had a few meetings, really trying to work through how we work together, how we communicate to make sure that we can give the best service we can to the residents and the community, and really hit the ground running as soon as this legislation passes. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions or comments that you all have.
So just briefly, and I know that most of this was picked up in CD, but I do want to make sure that the rest of the council understands it. How's your intake system going to operate, and how are you going to divide up the laborers? I mean, if I have an apartment building over in Bel Air Paradis or Cam's Corner or somewhere else, how are we going to how are we going to operationalize this, and how's the intake process work?
To the council president. So 211, we will have a special system call system at called an IVR. It will have people who are interested in tenants issues. They hit that. We already will have a specialist there who can focus on that call. Given the nature of the call, we already have various scripts to really try and get to the root of problems, understand where people are, geography, age, whatever the issue is. So we can screen that. The Morelands group, as I mentioned, is focused very much on Shaker Square, so we know what their geography is. Outside of that, for the organizing piece, it will go to Fifth Christian Church. Legal mediation services, again, given what comes out of the assessment from our 211 navigator, they'll be routed to either Legal Aid's tenant line or Cleveland Mediation Center, and then they'll work with the various emergency housing partners to help remedy whatever issues they would need regarding money.
So you're doing this in two different levels, pretty much. You're doing this on the macro level with big apartment buildings that have, 50 to 100 tenants, but you also have a plan in place to deal with if I'm just an average everyday citizen that has a landlord-tenant dispute. You have somebody who intake and can triage this and get it to the right person.
To the council president, that is exactly right. We already do that, and then the beauty of, again, 211 being at the front door is that we have the resource database of all the housing partners within the community. So something that may not be appropriate for one of these partners, we can still get them the help that they need.
Just so everybody could know, Judge Scott just fined one of these buildings $30,000 because of there's 3 buildings in the Moreland Hills area because of their lack of concern. And then unfortunately, one of the people that owns several other properties around the Shaker Square area unfortunately committed suicide recently, and now his partner is actually running a portfolio. So these are very contentious issues. They involve everything from organizing to legal advice to making sure that we have relocation. So one last thing, as we are deliberating this, how are we going to sustain it post 3 years? Even though I like to think that we're going to eradicate all these landlord-tenant issues for years, how are we going to make sure that we provide, where's Conwell at, the metrics in place in order to justify future investments, and where and how is the fundraising strategy going to be put in place? Because I don't anticipate us, for various reasons, getting any ARPA dollars anytime soon.
To the council president, that's a great question. The data is important. We track it every day through the calls, and we'll be able to assess, which one of these interventions or group of interventions actually resolve the problems, right? So I think that's going to be great learning there. As part of this, Cleveland State is going to be doing evaluation. They're going to be a partner along the whole way, again, really trying to assess the impact of this work, and really point to those interventions or groups of interventions that really get to keeping your residents stably housed. So we will work with all of these partners to make sure that over this 3 years as well, that capacity is sustained for going forward.
Okay. One last thing, and I would just ask this. I know that this may seem like a different or frivolous question, but we oftentimes fund these organizations, and the answer is for them to go into buildings and say, your councilman is bad, and you need to talk to your councilman and organize against your councilperson. One of the trepidations that me and Mr. Harsh, and I said I'm going to be more straightforward and honest speaking in 2025, one of the things me and Mr. Harsh had to navigate is that we had to navigate, you know, how these groups oftentimes turn, after we fund them, by the way, turn their ire towards council, and it winds up turning against an organizing tool to talk about how your council person should be doing more to help you with this situation. If we're investing in this, we're looking for partners, not adversaries, and we want to make sure that we're working with an organization like United Way, confidence in you, as well as the leadership of United Way, Ms. Sobel Jordan, to really make sure that our partners that we have do not turn this into a council versus community conversation. I know it sounds like an awkward question, but ladies and gentlemen, it does happen. How are we going to guarantee and make sure that doesn't happen?
Council President, trusting us as the fiscal agent for this and kind of the umbrella organization of this, we understand what you're trying to accomplish here, right? We will have our own MOUs with the various partners, and we'll make it clear that this is about the residents, right? This is about getting the residents and resolving issues between tenant landlords. That's where we need to focus, and we'll make sure that that's clear with our
And I
partners.
really appreciate that. I know this seems petty, and I know that the listening audience is like, why would the council president ask that? As recent as 2 weeks ago, when we were experiencing one of our worst cold waves of the year, in the of this Christmas season, there was an organization that, quite frankly, does good work, that took to the media to basically make accusations that were false about council not wanting a shelter in an area, when all the council person was asking was, can you make sure that the community is engaged before you just make that announcement? And I think that's fair, just having those kind of conversations with the community, because that council person is going to get the calls at the end of the day and wants to make sure they educate the community. So I think it was very unfair for an organization to go to the airwaves and try to create false misinformation that this council was not supportive of people in their most dire need. So I want to make sure that we clarify that. This investment is to have partners to work with council, not adversaries that want to try to politic every chance that they get. So I just want to make that clear. I do have confidence and trust in you. I do have confidence and trust in the Morelands Group and others. Do have confidence in Reverend Quincy and Fifth Church. I do have confidence in Legal Aid. These are all groups that I know do good work, but I just want to caution everybody, we're looking for partners, not adversaries. That's my line of questioning. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Mr. Chair,
Councilman Harsh, do you want to wrap us up and take us to the river?
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to point out something that was very, very important in the talks. And again, we did spend, through the chair, 2 years working this out with all of our partners. Mr. Chair, conflict is normal. Conflict is just part of daily life. And there will always be conflict in the world. And the question of what you do with conflict sort of separates out the conversation we're having. Conflict can lead to cooperation or it can lead to competition. And too much in the recent past, conflict has led to competition where people try to set up competing interests and they try to go at each other in this city. And what we need is cooperation to resolve conflict. And that's why the Cleveland Mediation Center is part of this. That's why Fifth Christian Church is part of this. They bring a maturity, understanding of conflict and conflict resolution to these issues that I think our colleagues are going to find refreshing. I think it's been a while since we've had this type of effort really supported in the city of Cleveland, and I can give you some firsthand experiences. When I was a young guy, when I had hair and it was still brown, I was an organizer, and oftentimes I could work with a group of people and get a problem resolved faster than the city of Cleveland could get it resolved. I'll give you a really good example. Say you've got a building of 50 tenants, and something is wrong in one of their buildings. You might want to call Building and Housing and try to get an inspector out there, but if you get an organizer out there to actually door knock those 50 units and find out that the problems they're having are consistent across all the units, and then just bring those tenants together to confront their landlord about it, you might get that problem solved faster than the city of Cleveland can get an inspector out there to solve the problem for you, which can take months and end up in court, right? There is a way for us to use cooperation within our communities to resolve our problems and to work in cooperation with the city. And I'm excited that we have a great group of people here that understand that, have that maturity and that approach to this type of problem solving. So, Mr. President, I'm glad you brought that up because it was really important.
Thank you, Councilman Harsh. And once again, thank you for your patience and time really putting all this together. I know that everybody was anxious, but you really took your time and put together what I think is a well thought out proposal with Mr. Surratt and brought some very good partners that I'm looking forward to working with at the table. Councilman Hairston, I know this was heard in DPS. Did you have any follow-ups?
Thank you, Mr. President. Fully support this piece. The committee did support this unanimously. As Mr. Harsh said, we have a great group here who's doing this work, led by United Way of Greater Cleveland. We are confident that this group together will yield some very positive results. As he said, and I've experienced this myself in my own neighborhood, and previously when CTO was still around, and even afterwards, where we just organized the residents. They came, they helped me out, and the owners quickly responded and addressed the issues. And so we need these boots on the ground. You know, these would be very important not only to the work that we do, but also our men and women in blue who's sitting behind us, and even a lot of their calls that they get in their interactions. You know, we can see some high-level results here that are going to be positive for everyone in the community. You know, Mr. President, I agree with you. You know, in 2025, you gotta just go at it. You gotta say what's on your mind. You know, you gotta you know, don't sugarcoat is what they would say from back in the day. You know, and that whole shelter piece was just messy, right? Just ridiculous, messy. People are just messy sometimes. Like, cut it out. So, Mr. Chair, fully support. You know, I'm glad that Councilman Harsh stayed on top of this, worked with this, and, you know, brought this forward to us. And so we fully support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And my attitude is partly your fault when you sending me new music that struck a chord with me this weekend. Councilman.
Absolutely.
So-
Thank you. Glad to be inspiration, Mr. President.
All right, Councilman, any other councilman would like to respond to ordinance number 1197-2024? Once again, this is with the United Way for Greater Cleveland to pretty much institute another Cleveland Tenants Organization type of organization. But we do need to understand a little bit more at some point in time about long-term funding strategies and also how we can be of help. Okay, I knew that's why I wanted to reiterate it because the dean is here, and I knew that he had a question to make sure that he reiterated. He probably reiterate what I just told you.
Yeah, probably.
But go ahead.
But anyway, I just want to make sure that once you have this in place, that you provide to us all the pertinent information that we need to refer people to. Because so often we fund organizations at this table, and then we never hear back from them, or we never get a report, a quarterly report, and I would hope that's part of this process, that we get a quarterly report. That's the Polensek amendment, so we know what you're doing and who you're interacting with. I think it's very important. I think there's been a big void since the Cleveland Tenants Organization went away. And I worked very closely with them in a day. And so now that you're taking that new role, I hope you're going to have that engagement with members of council. We know who to get a hold of. We know what we can expect that you can do, what you can't do, and then go from there. So that's it, Mr. Chairman. I just want to have that kind of dialogue.
Thank you. That's perfect, and that's exactly what we plan on doing. I will ask: is that an amendment that you're putting?
I'll make that amendment that there be a quarterly report to the council as it pertains to their interaction with our residents and our neighbors based on a ward breakdown.
Does the attorney have that amendment?
I do, Council President.
All right, do I have a second? Second is Councilman Brian Casey. Any discussion regarding this amendment? No discussion, hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment carries. Therefore, ordinance number 1197-2024 as amended stands approved. Thank you so much, Mr.
Mr. Chair,
Surratt. Yes.
I would tell Brother Ken, you know, I like that haircut he got over there, man.
I see.
I said,
I see.
he went from
Listen.
curly to straight. I said, he didn't get that at Cleveland Heights. He came down to St. Clair.
I almost didn't recognize it.
Hey, he
your
came to
hats on
Collinwood
and
for that
off.
one.
Yeah, I almost didn't recognize it. Thank you all.
appreciate
Thank you, Mr. Surratt.
Thank you.
All right. Please sign on. All right, public safety. You could join us at the table. Thank you. Good afternoon. All right, first ordinance is ordinance number 1350-2024 by council members Polinsky and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant from the United States Departments of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance for the FY 2024 Burn Justice Assistance Grant, local solicitation, and authorizing one or more contracts with the Cuyahoga County and cities of Euclid, Parma, Cleveland Heights, East Cleveland, and Garfield Heights needed to implement the grant. I believe we have Assistant Director Carlton, and she could announce the chief and the rest of the team.
Hi, Council President, Assistant Director Carlton. I'm here on behalf of Director Drummond. With me today, I have Chief Todd, Commander Kincaid. I have Dawn Hartsong here for grants, and Sergeant Perez for
Awesome.
domestic violence.
That's a new face. We haven't seen her yet, so welcome.
Saw her once, yes. Ordinance number 1350, 2024, if passed by council, would authorize the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a $630,689 grant from the U.S. Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance for the fiscal year 2024 Burn Justice Assistant Grant. The purpose of the grant, the goal of the Justice Assistant Grant is to provide funding for equipment, services, and personnel to advance basic law enforcement efforts. The City of Cleveland was selected by the grant recipients, Cuyahoga County, and the cities of Euclid, Parma, Cleveland Heights, and Garfield Heights to be the fiscal agent on behalf of the cities and the county. The funding will be divided as follows. City of Cleveland, $465,500. Cuyahoga County, $100,000. Cleveland Heights, $10,213. East Cleveland, $10,511. Euclid, $18,336. Parma, $11,228. Garfield Heights, $14,901 for a total of $630,689. The funding provided to the City of Cleveland will be used to maintain personnel and for training. Expenses to be reimbursed, this is Cleveland's portion. Personnel, $447,460. This is for 4 fingerprint examiners and 2 intelligence analysts. Travel, $18,040. This is for training, for a total of $465,500. There is no local match. The grant ends September 30th, 2027, and this is an annual grant we have received since 2005. And our team is available for any questions.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. This is pretty much something that we get every year. For the most part, it's pretty routine, but I don't think it's any increase or decrease. Is it Ms. Hartsong or Director?
To the chair, yes, the amount stays fairly similar. It goes up and down by maybe a few $1,000s, but it's fairly constant.
Okay, that's what I thought. Councilman Polinsky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We heard it in the Safety Committee. We had a good interaction with the chief and her command staff, and it was passed unanimously out of the Safety Committee.
Thank you. Chief, did you have anything you wanted to add to this? I know that we kind of just moved.
No, just I'm here for any questions, sir.
All right. Any other questions regarding ordinance number 1350-2024? Seeing no other questions, ordinance number 1350-2024 stands approved. Please sign on. Thank you. Ms. Hartsong, I finally got used to Ms. Hartsong. I forgot your former last name. That's how long you've been Ms. Hartsong.
Fritz.
Okay, I'm like, wow, that's been Ms. Hartsong for a while now. All right. Next is ordinance number 1351-2024 by council members Polinsky and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant from the Ohio Department of Public Safety for the fiscal year 2025 Impaired Driving Enforcement Program and Selective Traffic Enforcement Program, better known as IDEP-STEP. And please move forward, Director.
Council President, ordinance number 1351, 2024 if passed by council, would authorize the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant from the Ohio Department of Public Safety for the fiscal year 25 Selective Traffic Enforcement Program, known as STEP, and Impaired Driving Enforcement Program grant, known as IDEP. The goal of the Impaired Driving Enforcement Program, IDEP, and Strategic Traffic Enforcement STEP grant is to provide funding for OVI-related and speed-related traffic enforcement. The city will receive reimbursement for police officer overtime while conducting targeted enforcement. For the last grant year, the following was accomplished: 16 adult restraint citation, 1 child restraint citation, 7 speed citations, 1 distracted driving citation, 3 driving under suspension arrest, and 46 other citations. Expenses to be reimbursed: personnel, $61,769.16. That's police officer overtime. Education, $3,500 for posters, flyers on traffic safety. Fuel, $2,553.50 for a total of $67,822.66. The grant period is October 1st, 24 through September 30th of 25. We have received this grant annually since 2008. There is no local match.
Thank you. I don't have any questions. This is pretty routine. Councilman Polinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we heard it in Safety Committee. We had a good dialogue with the chief and the assistant director and the director and the command staff. But one of the things we did impress upon the chief is that members of council want to see more traffic enforcement in our neighborhoods because of the constant requests we're getting for speed tables in each of our neighborhoods. We are really adamant that we want to see this coming year, especially spring and summer, with more traffic enforcement in our neighborhoods. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions on ordinance number 1351-2024? Seeing no other questions, ordinance number 1351-2024 stands approved. Please sign on. Next is ordinance number 1355-2024 by Councilmembers Polinsky and Griffin by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant from the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services for the fiscal year 2023 Ohio Drug Law Enforcement Grant to provide funding for the operation of the Cartel Gang Narcotics and Laundering Task Force and authorizing agreements with various entities to implement the grant. Director in Chief.
Council President, ordinance number 1355, 2024, if approved by council, authorizes the Director of Public Safety to apply for and accept a grant in the amount of $136,875.79 from the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice for the fiscal year 23 Ohio Drug Law Enforcement Fund Grant. This legislation would provide funding for the operation of the Cartel Gang Narcotics and Laundering Task Force, CGNL, which was formerly known as the Ohio Law Enforcement Task Force. This grant receives a cash match of $45,625.26. The total budget is $182,501.05. The goal of the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services Justice Assistant Grant is to provide funding to law enforcement agencies for operating multi-agency task forces. The City of Cleveland will be reimbursed for costs associated with operating the CGNL task force. CGNL is a multi-agency drug task force that brings together local, state, and federal agents and investigators to ensure the most sophisticated investigation and prosecution resources are directed against organizing drug trafficking groups. The agencies that partner with the Cartel Gang Narcotics Laundering Task Force include Cleveland Division of Police, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the U.S. Attorney's Office, Internal Revenue Service, U.S. Customs, U.S. Coast Guard, Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, Ohio Adult Parole Authority, Ohio State Highway Patrol, Cuyahoga County Sheriff, Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, Ottawa County Drug Task Force, Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority Police, Bedford Police, Brooklyn Police, Independence Police, Moreland Hills Police, North Royalton Police, Parma Police, and Shaker Heights Police. Expenses to be reimbursed: personnel, $50,009.95. That's for police overtime. Contracts, $27,997.60 is police officer overtime for partner agencies. Travel, $10,012. That's travel related to cases and training. Supplies, $1,500 for office supplies. Other costs, $11,870 for vehicle maintenance and GPS data feeds. Confidential funds, $81,111.50. That's for buy money and surveillance costs for a total of $182,501.05. We have received this grant annually since 2005.
Thank you. Does the chief want to add anything to this?
No, sir. So Commander Kincaid from our Bureau of Special Services is here as well to address any questions.
Thank you. Chief, I really hate to bring this up, but I think it's very critical as we start to talk about federal grants. We heard about the sad situation that happened with Cleveland Heights the other day, and I know that the president has issued executive orders to try to apprehend a lot of illegal immigrants that they identify as illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants. And what I just want to understand is how would some of those orders apply when we get some of these grants that are going after some of these cartels? Let me make it clear. I want anybody who's breaking the law or causing any kind of criminal activity in our community to be apprehended and dealt with. But I also don't want to have grants and other things that we get from the federal government that will go after legal citizens, or people who are legally seeking, asylum here and other things. So I just want to understand that a little better. And as we get these federal grants, are there any strings attached that your local police department would have to adhere to in order to receive some of these grants?
To the Council President, these are specifically drug-related grants. The Division of Police is not going to seek out grants related to exactly what you talked about. That's not the goal that we have, and that's not the enforcement efforts that we're taking.
Great. That's great to hear. At some point in time, Chief, maybe if you could, with the leadership team or some key people on council, help us make sure that we understand what the policy is, because I will tell you that a lot of people in our community of all backgrounds are gripped with fear right now, and I really want to make sure that we are educating and communicating correctly with them on what our policies are going to be as a local Cleveland Division of Police, and working with the federal government around these issues, okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I think I have Councilman Polinsky and then Councilman Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we heard a piece of this legislation in the Safety Committee. We had a good dialogue with the Safety Director, Assistant Safety Director, the Chief, our command staff. One thing that was made very clear to us that there was a substantial amount of drugs confiscated, but the positive side is that fentanyl deaths are down in the city, correct? And that, to me, is a good indicator of the interdiction of trying to seize as much as we can. And, Mr. Chairman, you raised the point about grants, and it's been a concern of mine as well as to what action could be affecting us. But I know one thing, the issue of sanctuary, of the city being a sanctuary city, was never codified. So, and that's, I think, a very important thing to state for the record. We are not a codified sanctuary city. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councilman Brian Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director, I can understand the other pieces of legislation in here with the fiscal year 2024, seeing how we're so into 2025, but this is a fiscal year 2023 grant. Is this work that has already been completed and we're being reimbursed on, or are we 2 years behind in this grant that you said we get every year?
Through the Council President, no, this is a grant that the Office of Criminal Justice Services awarded to us late because there were some delays at the federal level with their getting approvals and with us getting approvals. So it's just starting now.
All right.
Even though it's fiscal year 23, it's going to take us to the end of this year.
All right, so will this same grant, Mr. Chairman, to Ms. Hartsong, will this same grant come again in 2026 for 2024? Is this a grant that's
President,
2
we
years
just
behind?
applied for it again.
So you applied for 2025 or 2026?
Fiscal year 25, we just applied for it last month.
Okay. Have we been awarded 2024, or are they behind that
The Council
much?
President, we have been awarded 2024, and that already came before council. This was backdated because they had major delays in awarding this funding, so they are a little bit behind on it, but they're still giving us plenty of time to expend the funds.
And then, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Hartsong, that was my second question, is when does this have to be expended by, and can you clarify who they are?
Oh, I'm sorry. Through the Council President, they is the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services, and we have until December 31st of 2025 to expend the funding.
Okay, so that office is already giving grants for 2025, even though they haven't awarded 2023 yet, correct? Or they're just awarding 2023?
Through the Council President, they just accepted applications. They have not given out any
Okay.
awards yet.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Casey. Don't see any other questions. Seeing no other questions, ordinance number 1355-2024 stands approved. And once again, Chief, if we could, I really want to maybe get some time with you, especially me and Councilwoman Santana and others, because there's been a flood of questions asking about what is our official stance and policy, and I really want to make sure we understand what that is, okay? Thank you. All right, next is ordinance number 1357-2024 by Council Members Polinsik and Griffin by departmental request, an emergency ordinance authorizing the directors of public safety or law to apply for and accept grants from Cuyahoga County Public Safety and Justice Services for the FY 2024 Stop Violence Against Women Act program for a sexual assault advocate for law enforcement and prosecution components of the Cleveland Domestic Violence Program, and authorizing one or more contracts with the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center and other entities to implement the grants. Director and I believe the prosecutor, Ms. Jordan, is at the table with us today.
Council President, yes, I've had the prosecutor join us, and if she can introduce her team.
We're working on a new mic system, but until then.
Good afternoon, Council President Aquila Jordan, Chief Prosecutor for the City of Cleveland, and with me is Berlinda Powell, our First Assistant Prosecutor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Ordinance 1357-2024, if passed by council, would authorize the Director of Public Safety and Law to apply for and accept 3 grants from Cuyahoga County for the fiscal year 2024 Violence Against Women Act. It's known as the VAWA grants. This legislation will provide funding for the operation of the Cleveland Domestic Violence Program, law enforcement and prosecution, and Cleveland Sexual Assault Advocate. The goal of the Violence Against Women Act grant is to provide funding to enhance the investigation, prosecution, and victim advocacy of domestic violence, stalking, and sexual assault. The City of Cleveland will be reimbursed for costs associated with operating the Cleveland Domestic Violence Program. This partnership with Cleveland Police Detectives, Cleveland prosecutors, and victim advocates from County Witness Victim Services. Cleveland will also be reimbursed for the costs associated with a victim advocate from the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center being assigned to the Police Sex Crimes Unit. The Domestic Violence Program for law enforcement, the Cleveland Police Domestic Violence Unit detectives investigate reports of domestic violence and stalking and present them to the prosecutor. The detectives share an office at police headquarters with victim advocates. The grant pays for the partial salaries of 2 detectives. Expenses to be reimbursed is personnel, $145,012.57 for detectives. Travel, $4,500 for the annual domestic violence conference. Supplies, $3,689.22 for office supplies and bus tickets. The total on this is $153,201.79. The grant award is $114,901.34. Matching funds of $38,300.45 for total project amount $153,201.79. The Sexual Assault Program, the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center assigns a victim advocate full-time to the Police Sex Crimes Unit. They help sexual assault survivors traverse the justice system and locate any needed support. Expenses to be reimbursed, this is contractual, $60,320 for the Cleveland Rape Crisis Center. Supplies, $1,187.39. Phone, $1,068 for a total of $62,575.39. The grant award is $46,931.54. Matching funds, $15,643.85 for a total project amount of $62,575.39. The Domestic Violence Program under prosecution. The City of Cleveland Prosecutor's Office provides prosecutors who focus on charging and prosecuting domestic violence and its related crimes, i.e. menacing by stalking, aggravated menacing, and violence of protection orders. To provide specialized attention to this issue and the specific concerns that arise when handling such cases and working with individuals affected by violence and abuse. This grant is used to pay all or a portion of the salaries for prosecutors to continue to assist in the prosecution of domestic violence offenders in the City of Cleveland through this specialized program. Expenses to be reimbursed, personnel, $215,134.76 for prosecutors, law clerks. Travel, $16,679 for the annual Domestic Violence Conference. Supplies, $6,937 for office supplies. Other costs, $6,099 for printing informational pamphlets for a total cost of $244,849.76. The grant award on this is $183,637.32. Matching funds, $61,212.44. Total project amount is $244,849.76. The grant period is from January 1st, 2025 through December 31st of 2025. This is the 7th year that we have received the sexual assault grant. We have received the domestic violence grants since 1997, and funding has been reduced at the federal level. We are now receiving less than half of what we used to receive, but are prosecuting more cases.
Thank you. Did anybody on the team, Prosecutor Jordan, or anybody want to add anything to this?
We just thank council for their continued support of this effort.
All right, thank you. Councilman Polinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable colleagues, to the Chief Prosecutor, to the Assistant Safety Director, to the Chief, and the command staff. We heard this piece of legislation. We had a lot of interaction, and I want to thank again the Chief Prosecutor for being here and folks from the Domestic Violence Unit. I want to make all my members, the newer members, aware that this was an area that the council helped create many, many years ago. Concerns about domestic violence and sexual assault in the city of Cleveland. And I want to thank then the previous administrations and this administration for continuing this effort. But again, it's greatly, it's of great concern to us that federal funds have been reduced in this area, which to me is a fair warning to all of us about, as you indicate, about potential other cutbacks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, ordinance number 1357-2024 stands approved. Please sign on. Thank you guys so much. I do have one miscellaneous. Councilman Brian Casey, you had the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to the Assistant Director, in the 2024 budget, Council allocated $50,000, $10,000 per district for expenditures. We just went through a number of award ceremonies where the Council was again hit up, and when we brought that $10,000 up, either the commanders didn't know about it or they said that the process to expend those dollars was very difficult. Is there a policy, or chief, I assume the chief, or is there a policy that goes along with that expenditure of dollars? And can you send, if there is, can you send council a copy of that? Because that was supposed to be an easy process for them to do things within the neighborhood. And there comes a point where, you know, these are commanders, right? We have to be able to trust their judgment as well and give them a little bit of leeway when it comes to spending this money. So I just wanted to bring that up because, again, we've heard that this money isn't expended.
Before you answer, Councilman Polinsky wanted to add on to that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would concur with Councilman Casey's concern and assessment, but also I had a meet 2 weeks ago with the I requested to meet with the auxiliary police unit, who insisted again that they have been told that the $100,000 that we set aside during reconciliation, that they're constantly being told there's no such line item for those funds. So we're going to have to actually put in the budget a line item for the district commanders and for the auxiliary police, because I was a part of that discussion, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you for the action that you took. That was agreed upon by the administration. Now we're told that it's not there.
And we need to verify that because we did make that a reconciliation.
That-
One more thing,
yeah.
I'd rather get all the council questions out and then you can respond instead of having the same
So,
response.
Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Councilman Casey for bringing this up. I just wanted to plus one on this. I got out of the second district similar concerns as we do a great award ceremony every year for our officers in the second, that the dollars allocated were tough to use or unable. I can't remember the exact scenario, but I just wanted to say that from Councilman Casey's point, I heard that same concern.
All right. Commander?
Right, so,
Chief.
through the council chair, there was a system put in place by Deputy Chief Fay with guidelines of how and to request the money, because there has to be accounts opened with the establishments to make sure the purchases can be made. I know that there was agreements with certain locations for food for the ceremonies, and I know that from what I was aware of, that's how they did purchase the food, was going through Dave's. I haven't heard any internal concerns about the process. I haven't heard any complaints or issues, but there were an established guidelines of how the money was to be spent. I haven't gotten the feedback, but we will definitely look into that to make sure. But I hadn't heard anything. And as far as through the council chair to Councilman Polenzek for the auxiliaries, so currently what we do with the auxiliaries, their mileage, it comes out of safety or police budget and their uniform expenditures. There's nothing on our line items that has a $100,000 line item for auxiliaries. So we were never updated to where that money is. So I would have to, we don't have a purchasing process that has funds set aside for auxiliaries. I know that conversation has come up several times.
Right.
But we do, from our police budget, pay for uniforms, equipment, and their mileage reimbursement.
Councilman, if I can, Mr. Titron, can you verify we did, that was one of the things with reconciliation?
Correct.
So can we see why that was not in the budget? And that's something that we might need to verify.
I don't know.
Because
We don't
I
have
know
a line
during
item for it.
reconciliation, that was one of the items that we put forth. Okay, we'll find out where that's at, Councilman, and we will make sure, and I'm glad to know that it wasn't in there because evidently somebody didn't put it in there. Yes, Mr. Councilman McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. And I just to note, like in the second, I believe we've always used Bruno's. And Dave's is great too, but if we could look at ways to make that more flexible for the commanders. I understand that everyone's got to still keep receipts and proper public purpose and all of that, but figuring out ways that the commanders can really, utilize those dollars. I mean, we've used Bruno's for, oh my gosh, I've been on council 9 years, those 9 years, and I'm sure before that as well.
Councilman Casey,
Yeah,
the last.
on that point, when we set that up, it was supposed to be more like a petty cash type thing as opposed to, needing contracts, going to Dave's, et cetera, et cetera. It was supposed to be more of a cash on hand type thing so that if police officers even ran into a family that, needed emergency groceries or whatever. And we're not saying they're doing everybody's shopping, but you guys know what we're talking about, right? The $30 here, the $20 here, that police officers come out of their own pocket for, that money was supposed to be on hand for reimbursable like that, as long as it's a reimbursable. I mean, again, we have to be able to trust the commanders to some point, right? This should not be a difficult process to only get, I know it's a lot of money, $50,000, but in the big scheme of the budget, it's really not. Especially $10,000 can go a long way within a district to help some of the people that we run into, especially victims of crime or whatever it is. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Understood.
Any last words?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just concur with Councilman Casey. I mean, for these neighborhood meetings that the chief is, I mean, the commanders are at, they're buying pizza, they're buying pop. They shouldn't have to all run all the way to Dave's to do that. I don't get that. I mean, there's businesses in our neighborhood. I don't have a Dave's left, we don't have a Dave's on the east side in the city anymore. So if we're going to go to Dave's, it's going to be in a suburb to patronize that. So we have businesses in the neighborhood. We should be able to go, they should be able to go to the local businesses and buy whatever they need for their neighborhood meetings. To me, there's got, the dovetail off Councilman Cage, there's got to be some flexibility here. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Can I just add one more thing, Council
Please,
President?
Chief.
So as you know, we do have restrictions on how our purchasing is done. And we have to, if it exceeds a certain amount,
Okay.
that's what they're following, the guidelines of the purchasing with the city of Cleveland. So the one thing is to make sure that the business was inside of the city of Cleveland.
I agree.
And we had to make sure that when the purchases were made, they were in line with how our bidding, processes for, the city funds couldn't be, handpicked. It had to be along with city contracts. So that was the one thing we have been following with the guidelines for the expenditure of the $10,000.
Sure. Councilman McCormick.
Thank you. Just on, is that the law department provided that guidance or purchasing? So this, I think, gets to Councilman Casey's point, and Chair, thank you for the privilege on this of time. For example, City Council has expense accounts that has to be proper public purpose, has to be for public community good, but we don't have to go through purchasing. I mean, obviously, it has to follow legal guidelines, and it's got to be a community event, and you got to have all the receipts and all that kind of. So I guess the question is, why are we required to go through purchasing as long as, and I'm looking at my lawyer. I know you're not prepared to answer this question, but I'm channeling my lawyers over here. So as long as it's proper public purpose, so as long as it's documented expenses and receipts and all that jazz, why do we have to go through purchasing on this?
Through the president to the councilman, I think we can sit down with purchasing and look at things to try to get to a yes. I'm not saying with all of the requests that are made that we can get there, but there is a purchasing process that we have to follow, and there are guidelines. I don't know on your side what's different than our side, but I know we do have parameters that we have set before us, and it will get kicked back, and that's when it
Yeah.
winds up coming out of people's pockets if we don't
So
do it
legally,
right.
there shouldn't be any difference. I mean, we're all
We don't have
governed
expense
under-
accounts.
Correct.
Right.
Maybe we should set them up.
That's what we
we
don't
should-
have.
We should look at this. I mean, just.
We don't have
So,
expense accounts. We
just-
don't have account credit cards. We don't have any of those. things
From
in the division.
experience, and this is more of a purchasing, and I'm not going to give everybody all the secrets, but ran into this when we were in CRB, when I was there. When it goes to purchasing, it goes in what's called a Fund 10. When it goes into a Fund 10, then all of the procurement requirements that purchasing requires govern that money, which can be cumbersome. What we decided to do is to actually create a grant system where we actually worked with other vendors, or we actually picked out the vendors like a Bruno's in advance so that we can actually take it through the process well in advance and plan in order to go through that process. Because just when you put it in the system, all of the city rules are applicable, and purchasing has strict requirements on how you spend any of those. Like, for example, I just give you an example. We were doing Hispanic Heritage Month, and we wanted to use a Hispanic vendor. And because in purchasing, we had to literally get 3 different quotes and then do best and lowest, guess what? The best and lowest wasn't a Hispanic provider, which would have been almost offensive to the Hispanic community if we picked somebody else that was not a provider that can do authentic Hispanic food and other things. So it can, be a little bit cumbersome when it gets in that purchasing system. So we might need to think about how we can put it in the least restrictive system as possible, so that you can be able to do this. And a lot of times that's actually finding an external partner that you can contract with that can handle a lot of the things that you're looking for. But just keep that in mind because it's a very tedious process.
Yeah. Council President, we'll work with
We
the
do.
Commissioner of Purchasing.
Let's talk with the Commissioner of Purchasing because it has to be a very, I guess you hear the consternation because what they're not telling you is when the commander can't do it, then they hit our pocket and they come and ask us for it. And we don't have it a lot
Not
of
supposed to do
times.
that.
Okay?
Yep, thank you.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Councilman Casey, for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
All right, next up is capital projects, if they can come to the table. Ordinance number 1199-2024 by Council Members Polinsik, Bishop, Hairston, and Griffin by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Capital Projects to lease certain property located north of Interstate 90 near Waterloo Marginal Road to Meadow City LLC for the purpose of developing native seed garden plots for the term of 3 years. And we have the Director and Ms. DeGennaro.
Hello, Mr. Chairman. So today we have a lease for Meadow City Native Plant Nursery, and I have Commissioner DeGennaro here who will go through the terms and the purpose of the lease.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, this legislation would authorize the Director of Capital Projects to lease city-owned land that is left over from the construction of I-90, Interstate 90, to Meadow City. They are, as the director said, a native plant nursery. They provide plants to, native plants to gardeners, landscapers, conservation organizations, including Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, the National Wildlife Federation, Western Reserve Land Conservancy, and Cleveland Metro Parks. And they have requested to lease these additional remnant parcels for, so that they can increase their production of native plants. The lease rate would be appraised value of $900, and the land is landlocked. It's only accessible by foot on sidewalk that's not accessible by vehicles. So they will harvest their plants via on foot.
Thank you so much. This was heard in Municipal Services. Councilman Bishop.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we fully vetted this in municipal service and recommend it for passage.
Thank you. Councilman Anthony Hairston.
Yes, Mr. Chair, fully supported. We did vet in DPS as well as the committee for passage. I do have one question. Will there be deed restrictions on this property in case they want, if they try to sell it at some point, anything?
Through the chairman to the councilman, we are just leasing it to them. So
We're
no need-
leasing, not selling?
Yep, mhm.
Okay,
Yep.
forget about it.
Yes.
All right. You know, I like
Thank you.
Sopranos, forget about it. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilman Michael Polinsik, I believe this
Yes.
is area you, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I worked with Meadow City when they took over city land bank property, public property on South Waterloo Road, on Waterloo Road at Westrup. They've done a nice job there. I support this. The only thing I want to make sure in this lease agreement is that they are responsible to cut all the grass on the property. Is that within the agreement?
Through the chair to the councilman, yes, we will include maintenance.
Okay, so they've got to maintain all the grass, any shrubbery, anything else that's on the property, they have to maintain all that, including their existing site. I just want to make sure that's there. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Other than that, I'm in complete support, Mr. Chairman. It's fallow land, just sitting there, and we have to cut the grass, and now we're going to have someone doing that for us. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, and thank you, Director. Seeing no other questions, ordinance number 1199-2024 stands approved. Last but not least is ordinance number 1200-2024 by council members McCormick, Bishop, Hairston, and Griffin by departmental request. An emergency ordinance authorizing the Director of Capital Projects to lease certain property located at and under the Superior Viaduct, Arc number 6, to the John G. Johnson Construction Company and/or its designee for parking and material storage for a term of 5 years with 1 5-year option to renew, exercisable by the Director of Capital Projects. Director.
Mr. Chairman, so again, this is a lease that we're presenting to you today. It's a lease renewal, and Commissioner DeGennaro will go through the terms and the lease rate as well as introduce our guest.
Thank you. I have with me Trish Turska, who is the administrator with the John G. Johnson Construction Company. The legislation would authorize a renewal of the lease for a term of 5 years with one 5-year option to renew. We lease the property, we currently lease the property under Arch 6. We leased it back in 2015 for 5 years with one 5-year option, and that lease will expire in March of 2025. So the company has requested to renew their lease. They are located directly adjacent, their business headquarters at 1284 Riverbed Street. They use this area for parking. The lease rate will be $1,165, which is the fair market lease rate as determined by appraisal. Currently, they don't use the property for anything other than parking, but they do have the option to use it for storage, and so we'll ensure that we incorporate it into the lease terms of prohibition against the storage of anything noxious, harmful, hazardous, and so forth. And the city will also retain a right of access for maintenance of the bridge.
Thank you. Is this a guest with us today?
Yes.
And I apologize, we would have had you earlier. I didn't know that you were a guest with us, but please proceed.
Thank
Do
you.
you want to announce anything?
Thank you for having me today. I just wanted to continue our relationship with the city and renew our lease for the next 5 years.
Okay, and
Thank
you're with
you.
John G. Johnson, or?
Correct. Administrator Trish Turska.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you, guys. You guys did a great job on my Meyer Supermarket over on 105th
Yes.
and Cedar.
Yes, it
And
was
I'm glad that
phenomenal.
everything finally worked out.
Absolutely.
Because I was having some fits about that, but good to meet you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, Councilman Mike Palinski.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question. If they're going to use it for storage, is there any requirement as it pertains to screening fence or anything? So
Ms. DeGenero?
Through the chairman, to the councilman, it's not visible at all from the street. The pier of the bridge abuts the street, so anything that goes on behind that pier is really not visible.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Seeing no other questions,
Chair, I
orders
was just
number.
gonna
Oh, Councilman
support three.
McCormick.
So no, I just wanted to thank the city team and fully
Oh,
support
forgot
this
about that.
ordinance. Great company. So anything we can do to help support them and get what they need to be happy here in the city of Cleveland, we should do. So just want to fully support this ordinance, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Who's the president for John G. Johnson now? Marty Weber? Okay. Love to meet him. I never met him, but he's doing a lot of work in the city, so, okay. Thank you. All right, seeing no other questions, ordinance number 1200-2024 stands approved. Thank you. Here you go.
Thank you.
Get that to her. Yeah, 'cause you guys did a great job. All right, seeing no other questions, this Committee of Finance, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is adjourned to the next call of the chair. This committee is adjourned.
Okay, so, hey, Councilman Casey, too, and crew,
Hold on, let me turn this on.